on the first night there, I guess you had some equipment trouble and you had to take like a 10-minute break right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a frequent problem with your rather hefty setup there?
No, not normally. It wasn't our equipment that blew. It was the actual power supply at the venue.
Was that right? Oh.
Yeah, it was a trip fuse apparently. It should have been enough from what we have normally. I think it's a 16 amp fuse, and it just we stipulate a power minimum, you know, and they met that stipulation, but it just tripped for some reason. Nobody could understand why, so they just doubled the rating, and we were all right for the rest of the night.
Didn't shake you or anything, you know?
Well, it's a little disconcerting to have to leave the stage, you know. I mean, because we normally would have just carried on, but we knew there was something quite drastic because half of the equipment wasn't actually playing. You know, we had bass and drums for half a number, and people were flapping on the side saying stuff, you know. So we left the stage, which was a bit disconcerting. But you know, I mean, it has happened before. It's not the kind of thing that never happens, but it wasn't our gear.
でこの日本に来る前はアメリカツアーとかヨーロッパツアーやってたらしいんですけど、今回のツアー全体で他にこの後とかどんなことがあってどうなるか。
You guess came here via America. What other countries will you be visiting on this tour?
We actually came there by America. We finished before Christmas. We came by New Zealand and Japan.
Oh, is that right?
Sorry, New Zealand and Australia, and then Japan. From here we're going on to all sorts of weird things. We've got some. From here we're going on to Honolulu. We're playing some Hawaiian shows, and then we're into South America.
Is that right? South America?
Yeah. I can't remember which ones, but various gigs in South America.
Brazil, Argentina, I would imagine.
Yeah. Definitely Brazil. And then we're back in Europe, I think. And then hopefully we get on and do some English dates in June.
It's a long tour.
Yeah, we've been on the road since last June. We started in Europe last June and then did 5 months in America.
Gee, so you will have been on the road for a year then, Stop.
Yeah, there's every chance it will be longer than a year as well, because the dates keep being added while we're away, you know. So it's a long one.
で今回に限らずロシアツアーやったりとか非常に全世界的な落ち着いたないようなところでライブやったりとか活動がするんですけど、なんかそれは特にでしょうか。
You have also visited Russia, and as you mentioned, you have South American dates. You're kind of covering some of the spots off the beaten track there. What's behind the global approach this time around? Anything in particular, any attention?
Yes, a world tour. You know, I mean, if you're going to tour properly, there are lots of places to play. There are lots of markets that don't generally get covered, you know, and they're markets that many bands can go to but don't. Russia wasn't our idea. That happened in '86. And it was something we were invited to do. You know, it wasn't kind of part of our plan or anything. It was just that we were actually asked if we wanted to go to Russia by the Russian cultural attaché or whatever.
Is that right?
The Minister for Western Music or whatever.
Did they go knocking around on many doors, or did they single you out in particular? Or did you just have to say yes?
I think they did single us out. Yeah.
Is there any reason in particular?
Represent the acceptable face of Western pop or whatever, you know. I mean, I don't know. It was it's part of their cultural, glasnost and all that. We were the Kiev Ballet were going to London at the same time, and it was a kind of a cultural swap, you know. So we were what the Russians got when England got the Kiev Ballet.
Is that right?
And it was a bit sort of historic because we were the first Western band to tour Russia proper, rather than do one show. We did 12 dates, you know.
Is that right? Okay.
Whereas people like Elton John had been there already, but you know, he did it was a kind of a cabaret thing. He did after a big dinner and dance. He got up and played a few numbers on the piano. You know? He didn't actually have a band with him. Right? And I mean, people have been there before, but we were the first really to go and do it properly, you know. And it was because we were invited. the other territories are, you know, not just because we fancy visiting them, because they're there.
特になんか理由がない。
いや、それはやっぱり、まあ、ワラトサをやる以上、それはできるだけ多くの国を回りたいっていう、まあ、それだけにいいとこだね。
ロシアはなんかいうきっかけある？
あれなんだよ、その文化交流のこう館長みたいなのがあって、でそこに呼ばれたたまたま。
でも帰ってきてから、例えばイギリスの上さ、名前からして UB40 だったら、左寄りの熱水本があるから、メラーから出た感じがあるから、こうしたりだとか、お前なんだ
Has your affiliation with the Soviet Union led to your being labeled as communist sympathizers at all by, say, the more radical fringes on the right?
I think we've probably always been labelled as not necessarily communist sympathisers, but left-wing, dirty, cummy bastards. You know, I mean, that's probably why we're invited in the first place to go and play Russia. You know, because of the political content of our lyrics. You know.
Yeah, right.
But I don't think it's been anything adverse. I think it's probably done us a lot of good. You know, got a hell of a lot of publicity. People were very interested. While we were there, the British and American press were constantly looking for outrage. You know, they were constantly digging and saying, "Oh, you had a horrible time." You know,
I see.
They really treated you badly. You know, which of course they weren't. We were sort of honoured guests. You know, so we actually were treated very well, very sort of cosseted. You know. But I've never had a bad reaction. People are always, you know, really interested. Because I mean that's what we were really. We were really interested. You know, we were invited, and we thought this is the kind of thing you go and say no to. You know, it's an opportunity to go and not only see a place but play a place that otherwise we just wouldn't have entered our heads. You know what I mean?
They didn't ask you to play up some of the problems in England?
We were asked if we would make speeches between the numbers.
And to what effect?
They wanted us to explain the lyrics and explain our anti-Thatcherism and all that kind of stuff.
So there was kind of a propagandist angle.
Sure. Yeah. But we refused. You know.
Was that really?
Yeah, of course. We just said, this is the same show we've just played in America, it's the same show we've just played in the UK. And that's all we get. We ain't doing anything different. You know? It doesn't matter what country we're going to. We'll play the same show. We've just got to Japan. This is the same show we played in Australia, New Zealand, America. You know, this is the set we're playing this year, and that's it. If you know, you've invited us here to play the show, and that's what we do. You know, and they were, I think, surprised because I think they had a different idea of us. But there was certainly no, you know. I mean, they didn't try to persuade us or anything. They suggested that we might want to do that because people didn't understand what the songs were about. You know? But when we said no way, we're doing the exact same show, they lived with it. In fact, they provided us with an interpreter because they assumed that we were going to make speeches. And in fact, all the interpreter did all night was interpret my one-liner. You know, this next song is called so-and-so, and he went, called so-and-so in Russian, you know. And that was about it, which was a bit like a holiday thing.
で、そのロシアの反応とかが通訳がついてたりとか、僕は見てみたけど、他にもユーゴスラビアで、アルゼンチンであったりしてて、でそういう他の国々でなんかファッションのことを。
Good morning, Jimmy.
Oh, that's me. Phone call. Oh.
Nice to meet you. All right, Steve Harris. Nice to meet you. Let's see.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, we'll pick up things in progress here. The question was about other countries you visited. You said you scored successes in Yugoslavia and Argentina as well. Have we ever been to Yugoslavia?
We scored record success.
Yeah, it was meant.
Yeah, we've never actually been there.
Oh, is that right? You haven't been there. So this upcoming South American tour will be your first time to Argentina?
No, we've been to Argentina. We've been to Brazil, but we haven't been to Argentina or Yugoslavia.
Oh, we went to Argentina?
I don't know.
I know we're going to. We're going to.
言ってないから当然ないわ。
じゃあ、そういったね、全世界的な人気バンドであったんだけども、要するに去年アメリカだけが納得運転だったわけで、そういうふうにいろんな国ではイギリスでも受けてる、いろんな国でも受けてるんだけど、一番でかいアメリカで受けてね、自分たちはどう受けてる？
Having achieved global success, at least more global than other bands, how did it feel to more or less conquer that final frontier of America last year with the success of the single?
Correct.
About time.
Yeah. It felt like it was just reward, you know, for hard work. We've been going there since 1982 every year and slugging away and building a live audience. I mean, we've always had a better live audience than our radio play or our record sales would warrant. You know? And in fact we work it the other way around. Because of the live audience we've been expecting more radio play and more record sales and not getting them, you know. Because radio play has been very, very slow to categorise us because it is so pigeonholed there, you know.
Well, I mean,
you have to fit into a type of radio.
Well, I mean, it's pretty straightforward reggae, though. I mean,
But where does reggae go?
Exactly.
Well, reggae
That's what I'm
doesn't
saying.
any existing.
Exactly.
format, yeah.
Exactly. And that's been the problem for us for you know for years.
It
So.
seems that American blacks don't really like reggae.
Well,
Too much.
yeah, Americans pretty much figured when Bob Marley died, he took reggae with him.
Oh, really? Wow, yeah.
It just doesn't exist any longer.
Well, they seem to have changed their mind.
Yeah, except for now.
This year, last summer, seems to have changed. The whole attitude towards reggae seems to have changed dramatically.
It kind of comes and goes, to tell you the truth. It comes in little spurts. Like there's that guy who did the cover of the Cat Stevens song, Wild World.
Oh, Jimmy Cliff.
Yeah, no.
Maxi Priest?
Yeah, Maxi Priest.
Maxi, yeah.
He had pretty big success with that. But and Ziggy Marley has been doing fairly well, even on the black charts, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes in spurts. Did you ever find out what put Red Wine over the top? What was the actual?
We found out how it happened. We still don't quite believe it, but what happened was a DJ in Phoenix had a request chart, and he played Red Wine on the request chart, and it got so many phone calls that it became number one for about 6 weeks on the request chart. And because of that, the next radio station started playing it. They played us to it, and then it just sort of mushroomed. It wasn't released. It was 4 years old, and you know, it hadn't been released, and it just started getting played. And that one area was just giving it massive airplay, and it just sort of started to spread. And then A&M got in touch with us. In fact, we'd just arrived in America to promote our new album and everything, and they said we've got to release Red Wine, guys. You know, this is like going crazy. It was actually getting more airplay. It was on more radio stations than it had been when it was released in '84, and it got into the top 40. And they said we've got to re-release it. Can we please re-release it? You know, and we were saying what about the new album, and they were saying this will do the new album so much good. You know, and of course they're right. And we said yeah, sure, go ahead. I mean, we're embarrassed about Red Wine. When we'd taken it over there in 1984, we thought this is the hit for America. Right, you know, it had already got number one in like 15 countries or something. You know, we were going, we're going to have one for America. And of course, it sort of didn't fail miserably. It just got inside the top 40, but it didn't do anything like we hoped. And that was like vindication. You know, we thought, yeah, go ahead, and it just went mad. You know?
Yeah, it makes us think that our records are good enough as long as they get the exposure. But people do like our records, they just got to get to hear it.
That's like I was saying to you, you know, we've always thought that if we could only get the airplay that our live audiences would, would warrant, then we would have had hits a lot earlier. But there again, maybe American tastes weren't ready for, you know, Red Wine in 1984.
Could be.
And they were in 88.
Yeah, it could be.
It definitely seems to me that more people know what reggae is now than used to. I mean, you know, people used to say, what kind of rock and roll is it you play, you know, and stuff like that. And if you said reggae, they wouldn't know what you meant. Or they might sort of have a vague connection with that Jamaican calypso type sound.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Whereas now people definitely know what reggae is.
They used to say like All Night Long by Lionel Richie was reggae inflected. It's completely asinine, you know. That's pretty representative of the
Well, the first time we went over, the the Rolling Stone poll had a reggae section, and number 1 was the Police, number 2 was Elvis Costello,
Right.
and number 3 was Black Alert.
There you go.
And that was the top 3 reggae acts. Elvis fucking Costello.
Yeah.
Who I admire, actually, I really like, but no way would he ever claim to be
Elvis
anything to
raps
do
the
with
Yeah, come on.
Elvis job.
And even the Police, you know, and that a reggae band and never have been. You know,
Yeah,
reggae influence.
Well, they took heavily from Bob Marley, especially the way Sting sang and some of the rhythms.
Sure, but they were more dub influence than they were reggae influence.
Yeah, their roots were rough.
Without a doubt.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, I mean, they openly took from reggae. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
If they weren't ever a reggae act, they wouldn't claim to.
Yeah, it's rather disheartening.
Yeah, sure.
True.
じゃあ例えばそのアメリカに限らずね、世界のいっぱい回ってるってことは、なんだろうな、レゲエっていうものを広めてるっていうか、これが本当のレゲエなんだけど、レゲエ十字軍みたいな、そういう使命というか意識みたいなのがあるんですか。
Do you see you guys see yourselves as official spreaders of the reggae faith around the world, going to different countries? Is that something you consider an obligation or a goal?
Not official. No, we've always sort of. It's been part of our goals to popularise reggae because you know reggae was our lifeblood. You know, I mean reggae's what we've grown up on. Reggae's what we love. Reggae's the music that we're totally into. You know,
It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I don't know whether we popularise reggae or we become more popular as reggae becomes more popular. I'm not sure which.
Sure, I'm not saying we were successful at it, but certainly that was, you know, that was part of our plan. But I mean, you know, the plans you have when you form a band, but they're a bit grandiose anyway. You know, you were going to conquer the world and become the biggest band in the universe and make reggae the number 1 music. Yeah, of course, that's what we were going to do. You know, whether we actually now believe that that's what we're doing or it could ever be done.
I guess when all things considered, though, you guys pretty much are the biggest reggae act in the world. I mean,
not pretty much.
Yeah.
I would say nobody.
Yeah, nobody comes close.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
What's made the difference? Are they not ready for?
Well, what makes a big difference, I think, is our lyrical content. You know, our image. The fact that neither of us are white, therefore we sound different. We don't sound like a Jamaican reggae band.
Yeah.
Plus, we don't sing Rasta lyrics. You know,
Right.
Which I think alienates a lot of people from the music. You know.
Right.
Obviously, a lot of people aren't going to relate to Jar. You know, and non-stop songs about him. Which is what a lot of reggae's about. You know.
Urban music that we sing, like way back in America, there's quite an urban sort of sound, I think, which most reggae has. You know what I mean? So people who live in big cities can relate to it, I suppose. Rather than it just being about sunshine and or exotic things, we're sort of down to earth and people in America and can relate to it.
I thought very surprised to find that you have scored that sort of success in Yugoslavia. I guess you're kind of that link in the chain that bonds the Yugoslavians with that original reggae impulse there. You kind of filtered it.
I haven't got a clue on that success. I've never been there, so I mean maybe if we went we could glean some information.
No, I used to know some Yugoslavians in Germany, and we had just number 1s there.
Yeah, I've done Yugoslavian interviews. That one guy keeps turning up every time we do European festivals. He turns up and goes, "Our biggest band in Yugoslavia." But I've never been able to understand why.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I can understand why we're the biggest band in Holland.
Yeah, right.
Because reggae's massive in Holland.
Right.
They're very laid back. They smoke a lot of dope and get into reggae. So I can understand that we would cross over a lot of boundaries.
Right.
Yugoslavia leaves me completely confused.
で今回の日本でのライブで演奏したあれその演奏曲もそんな感じなんだけども要するに去年出した UB40 ってアルバムが複雑プッシュされてメインの曲になるはずなんだけどそのレッドレッドワインのアルバムのフレイバーオブグラウンドと大体5曲6曲ずつぐらいなんで同じぐらいで、その2つのアルバムをメインに作る
うん
でもう4年前のアルバムをそうやって今になって、またニューアルバム出したばっかりなのに、メインのところに置かなければならない、それはなんかジレンマみたいなものが感じました。
Seeing from what you have to say, I guess it's not that much of an irritation to have to perform a lot of the Labor of Love songs. You noted that you performed about the same number of Labor of Love songs as you did from the most recent album. That's not irritating or anything to you to have to
Well,
go
you do.
back.
I think when you go to see a show, you want to hear the band play their most popular records, and you have to, when you design a set, you have to keep that in mind. And Labour of Love was our biggest selling album there as well, so I suppose that you have to always include those tracks.
But I don't feel like a cover song's an inferior song, you know.
I don't think that's what he means. He means that it's because it's a cover song, but because it's the last phase of the band. It's like, a lot of artists come out and say, well, I know you want to hear my hit from 1982, but, this is the new us, and, you're going to get it whether or not
Well, in fact,
want
what
it.
we say, because we don't play very much stuff from 1982. We play from Labour of Love, which was 84, but we've dropped a hell of a lot of things that people want to hear from the earlier stuff, because we've been playing it for 10 years, there are all sorts of tracks that Tyler Magic Producer 1 in 10 tracks that die-hard fans, long-time fans have always want to hear. And of course you can't play everything, you can't please everybody. So generally you try to play the stuff that you know is the most popular, that most people are going to want to hear.
Because that's what I want to hear when I go to see somebody else.
Yeah, sure. And if I go and see somebody and says, I know you want to hear my hit from, my number one hit from 4 years ago, but I'm not going to play some good stuff with it, then I'm going to be pissed off.
Yeah, right.
Generally, you've got to try and please the majority of your audience. And for sure, the majority of our audience heard of us through Labour of Love.
で、レイバー・オブ・ラブが商業的にも一番成功したんだけども、8年やってる中でも、アルバム流れてみたアルバムで音楽的にも非常にでっかいターゲットそれまでよりインストゥルメンタルアルバムとか歌物版とか、自分によってはそういうふうに
He saw Labor of Love as a major turning point for the band, saying the way he describes it, Labor of Love kind of seemed to bring the vocals to the forefront, whereas before you had people doing instrumentals, and it wasn't that much of a straight pop outfit. Do you see it in the same sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think we went from being like a garage band, which is what we started up as, just a bunch of people that got together and knocked some music together, which happened to be popular at the time, so becoming like a more professional commercial act, it was always our intention to be as big a band as possible, and that Labour of Love marks that success in that field. So yeah, I suppose it was us coming of age in a way and expanding our audience and doing things that were going to make us more and more popular, and we've learned from that. Even though we still have aspects of that now, from the early days, you can still hear the early band in the music that we're making now. But yeah, it was a turnaround point.
It was a big turning point for us in many ways. It was the album we wanted to do right from the start. That was what we wanted to do with our very first album. And each time we made another album, we kept saying, we want to do Labour of Love now. Everybody, in the business was going, we can't do an album, a couple of versions, terrible idea, the worst career move you could make,
Why were they saying that? Do you think it would ruin your credibility?
Yeah. Because of the kind of band we were, because of our lyrical content, etc. You can't do an album of love songs by somebody else, and we're going, here we can, that's what we want to do. And it took us 4 years, and 4 albums, and eventually we went, look, this is the album we're doing and we want to do it. And so, when we made it, it was like a great relief to make it, you know what I mean? It was something we wanted to do for ages. There was no pressure that you have with your own material. It was very easy for us to do, wasn't it? We just flew into it and enjoyed it so much because we knew the tracks to death. They were very familiar numbers to us. So it was it was easy and relaxing. Probably the best time we've ever had in the studio, because all the pressure seemed to be off. You know, there was no stress with it. It was real easy to do, and the vocals were mixed up front because we liked them, because we knew the tunes and everything. Do you know what I mean? It was a different thing. There was no self-consciousness about oh, leave my voice down there and it's too loud and all that kind of stuff. We were more relaxed with that album than we had been previously, and I think probably than we have been since. You know, it was a very easy album to do, and that's why we'd love to do another one.
Is that right?
A later love to would be brilliant. Yeah.
Is that right? Well, do you have like songs you do in concert that you haven't?
No, ones that we do in concert now, but we've got a list of songs as long as your arm, you know, of tracks that we grew up with. And I mean, there's more than enough for, you know, half a dozen volumes of
right.
love, yeah.
That's amazing. But do you think you'll actually do it though?
Oh, there's every chance.
Yeah. Very good chance we might do it. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You smile as if it's almost in the can.
It's certainly not in the can, but it's in the air, you know. It's being talked about very seriously, just because, you know, we'd love to do another one.
Nobody pointed the finger though.
And I think record companies this time will go, oh, what's a good idea?
Yeah.
Volume 2 of Flavor of Love, you know.
Seeing as how every other artist from about 1985 has done a cover version that's made it to the top 10, I'm sure that they're kind of ecstatic about that approach.
Oh right, yeah. But I think we learned quite a bit. Maybe not as much as we should have learned, but we did learn quite a bit from that just by picking apart somebody else's song.
Yeah. You know, arrangements, all sorts of stuff. Because we are very much, you know, self-taught and have learnt in public, you know, and that's why you can demonstrate our progress album by album. You know? And it's fairly obvious, and we don't use producers, we do it ourselves. You know, so after 5 albums, you would expect it to be a turning point. You know, you would expect there to be an improvement in you know, all aspects of making a record, really.
だからこのレイバーブラブだけだと会社だからギターも含めてギターもないってで自分たちに加えてDJ にしたDJ アルバム作ったんで結構一枚一枚で変化してきてるんです、でそういうふうに変わってきてるっていうことはさ埋まった見方かもしれないけどもそれはイギリス国籍であって、で白黒取り混ぜた感じのバンドで、それで演芸をやるっていうかなんか自分たちのサウンドアイデンティティがジャマイカのレゲエミュージシャンがこれだっていうのがないから、そういうのこれかあれかっていうか参加する時がどうでもあるんじゃないか、それともなんか今あるサウンドをより良くするための階段にしてるんですね。
なるほどですね。その前者の方が独自のサウンドを探ってきたのか、
探しみたいな感じだと。
Do you think the evolution of the band has been like a process of trying to improve, or has it been more a process of trying to establish your roots? Which do you think accounts for the change? It's been kind of like, as you mentioned, sort of a change to
Trying to improve, I think.
That's a really difficult question.
I guess it could be both. I guess the roots are rather obvious.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I suppose our roots is never, that's never really in question, I don't think. I mean, we knew what direction we were coming from. We didn't really change that direction at all. And we stuck to it while trends have come and gone.
Yeah.
So, I don't think we ever lost sight of what we were trying to do. All we've done is improved what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think everything we've tried to do it's been a learning process, you know, from knowing nothing to with each album trying to improve. I don't necessarily think every album is an improvement, you know, but I think they're all attempts at improvements, you know, as we're learning and arguing between each other what we're doing wrong and what we must do and all that. You've got to remember there's 8 of us, and we're very sort of democratic setup, so we, you know, we scream and argue about what we should be doing, and we're all trying to go in the same general direction, but there's like 8 of us have got a different idea of where that direction is, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's all in the same general direction, but there's 8 pools.
Right.
So you always end up with a compromise between the 8 of us, but generally that's what it is. It is a learning process, you know. You're trying to just do what you do better.
Mhm. Right.
You're trying to get the results on vinyl
Mhm.
to be closer to your expectations, you know.
Which is something I guess you would share in common with just about any musician. I suppose that's what all
Sure.
boils down to.
Yeah. The only difference is that generally other musicians put a lot of trust in a producer. You know,
Mhm.
they use somebody else to channel their ideas through.
Right.
And we've never done that. And the idea is, you know, has been frightening to us. Although of course there are also members of the band that say we should use a producer just for the experience.
Just for the experience.
Yeah, because it might be a vast improvement. You never know.
Uh-huh.
It might turn out to make a great album. There are other members of the band that go, oh no, I couldn't use a producer.
Mhm.
I couldn't let somebody else take control. You know.
Right. Well, I guess if you use a producer, there's a danger of some guys getting cut out and whatnot. You know?
Mhm.
It's like their voice is simply not going to be heard. Their part is going to be
Sure.
scrapped.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah, but
Hot shot producer's going to say, my bass has got to go, or else
course,
that keyboard is out.
some members of the band might think that was the right way to go.
Who's going to tell them?
例えばね、複雑に入り組んだ自分たちのバックボーンを使ってジャマイカのレゲエミュージシャンだとラスタミュージックとして非常にアイデンティファイしやすい音楽のスタイルになってくるので、そういうのを非常にジャマイカのレゲエバンドなんかにバックボーンとかでなんかコンプレックスみたいな目的に追いつかない感じだったりっていうのがかられたのではない。
Have you ever seen reggae music as performed by Jamaicans as being something kind of beyond your own ability, something beyond what you're trying to do? Or is it simply something different?
Well, I think there's yes and no to that. I mean, obviously, Jamaican reggae sounds different to English reggae. But they're all different kinds of reggae. I mean, for instance, Shine has made an album in New York, and that sounds like New York reggae. I think that we make Birmingham reggae, so there's no way we're ever going to sound like a Jamaican reggae band.
As we'll definitely make London reggae.
Yeah, London reggae.
You know,
Yeah,
they don't sound like a Jamaican band,
Right.
but they're definitely playing reggae. There's no question about that.
But that said, I mean, I suppose if we really wanted to, I'm sure we could pretend that we were and make a sound that was very
Now
similar.
there's the difference. When we first started, what we wanted to do was sound like a Jamaican reggae band,
Right.
When we first started as a band, then we realised we didn't sound like a Jamaican reggae band, but we liked the way we sounded, and we've progressed in our own way. Now I think we're perfectly capable of sounding just like a Jamaican reggae band if we want to.
Right.
You know, if we jam as a band together, you wouldn't know, you know, the difference. We could play like any Jamaican reggae band, but that's not what UB40 do anymore, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
We have our own distinctive style and sound, and that's what we do. It isn't hard to sound like a Jamaican reggae band now that we can play,
Right.
you know what I mean?
But there's just no point.
But
Right.
exactly, yeah, I mean, what?
むしろね、だから
There's plenty of Jamaican reggae bands doing it very well.
Okay.
バンドのこう成長の仕方とか持っていき方がレゲエバンドというよりはイギリスのニューウェーブバンドじゃないかな、だから自分たちとしてはレゲエバンドというよりもイギリスのバンドであるニューウェーブのバンドであるというのをするべきっていうのかな。
So would it be fair to say that you feel more of a sense of belonging to the so-called new wave movement as opposed to reggae music?
No. Although there is, I mean, we are part of pop, and I don't feel too bad if somebody says we're a pop band.
No, we very definitely are a pop band. You know, I mean, once you're accepted as mainstream pop, and you're competing within that area, you are a pop band. You know, but our affinity goes to reggae, without a doubt. Always have been, always will be.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, we. I would actually feel more insulted if somebody said that we were a new wave band than if we were a pop band. I like the idea of being a pop band more than a new wave band because new wave reminds me of that word rock, where it sort of has like a serious edge and slightly pompous, I think. And I'd certainly be thought of as a pop band of rock.
Certainly not a rock band.
I think that new wave is almost a dead term. I mean, I don't know who it could refer to now. I mean, we're talking to Elvis Costello and the Police.
But it has like a serious undertone, I think, when you say new wave, as opposed to pop, which to me is like that word rock. It becomes synonymous with sort of adult pop music, which I find a little bit.
The thing is, you Englishmen seem to have a real insistence on this word pop. I heard they insist on calling themselves pop bands.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Well,
that's something very we hear a lot in these interviews.
Yeah, well, I think
just a pop artist is like
that's right. Yeah, because
a
we
routine
don't,
denial of everything else.
well, that's because we don't take it too seriously. You know, we're a bit tired of serious interviews. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of serious rock journalists who can't call themselves pop journalists. They have to say I'm a rock journalist. You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, we're not allowed. Lots of British people just say,
Right.
That's all we do. They don't, because in England you don't get so categorised as you do in America, as we were saying earlier.
Right.
There isn't this kind of radio and that kind of radio.
Right.
It's all played.
Yeah.
Because it's all only pop music
It's all
after
pop.
all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
で、だからポップバンドであるけども、今のステーションでありとかやってるんですけども、昔例えばマースカルベのところとかさ、UB40 だとか、マダム・ミュージックとか、より暗いし、音楽的にもマイナーな曲だし、歌詞も具体的で絶望的なものが多かったんですけど、今のメッセージはすごいソフィスケーションされてます。で、その初期の頃の自分たちの先鋭性というか、政治的な姿勢みたいなところを今になってそういうふうに思ってます。
You've talked about your having grown as a pop band and having become more adept at what you do. Most notably the Labor of Love album being sort of a turning point. Looking back on the earlier stuff, the more political slant stuff, the darker tones, the dub stuff. How do you see that in perspective?
Well, I don't actually see it as more political.
No, I don't see that.
In any way. I think, since Labour of Love...
Maybe political, like the word he was just songs with a message.
Yeah, well, same thing. Yeah. I don't mind using the word political. In this context, since Labour of Love, I think we've done our strongest political lyrics. Our best. Yeah. That doesn't mean, I don't like some of the songs we did previously, because we did some strong songs before Labour of Love, but I'm certainly proud of the social consciousness or political content of lyrics that we've done since Labour of Love.
Yeah, we were guilty of naive sloganeering, I think, in the beginning, just like, young people do. When we were younger, we were more naive about things, and we tended to make sort of blanket statements and not really appreciate the complexities of the subject that we seem to sing about. I think as we've got older, we've understood the complexities a little bit more, and it's become more disguised, I suppose, which is why people think that we're less political, but in actual fact that's not true. Just like everybody who gets older, their politics becomes not so black and white, and that's true of the way I do it as well. So I wouldn't agree that we were. Although that said, I think our music's happier now happier sounding than it was in the beginning, because we've experienced more than just living in Birmingham. I mean, we've seen the world, and that's going to be reflected in the music as well.
Right. You've got to remember, we have lived a very privileged life for the last 10 years. When we were writing our very first songs or making our early music, our only experience was at Birmingham, which is a pretty dark and dreary city, So our music was fairly dark and dreary, which was a criticism rather than anything else,
Although Jim says, tend to like that drab urban kind of...
Oh, they do now. They do now. But then we were accused of being drab and boring and dreary.
Right.
Why can't they make some happy music? Now we make happier music. I don't mean lyrically, I mean musically. People now say, what happens to The dark and
Yeah,
drab and dreary
yeah.
days, you know.
Yeah.
You can't win, man.
But I do think it's true that that aspect is missing out of that music. You know?
Out of the music, certainly, yeah. It's only the lyrics I would argue about. I think, you know, there's some very strong lyrics on the new album. There's, you know, just as much political content. Sing Our Own Song, which is a song I'm very proud of. It's only, what, 2 years old.
That's a very direct political statement, is it?
You can't get any more direct than Sing Our Own
Right.
Song, you know,
Right.
which we sang last night.
Mhm.
Because we're still proud of it, you know, it's a potent lyric.
Mhm.
The hair's still standing on the back of my neck when we do the song.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I want to have true drama.
yeah, I don't, you know, I take exception to you know, the comment that the lyrics. Well, no, I'm not saying it to you. Just, you know, I mean, I've had much heavier criticisms in interviews that the lyrics have gone soft. You know. And I would say that on the new album, you've only got to listen to Boys and Girls Come Out to Play, Contaminated Minds. You know, those are,
It isn't true.
because it isn't true. Those are just as political as anything you've ever written. You know.
But they may be more specific rather than a general. But we used to sing manifestos.
The subjects are a bit more specific. Yeah, we don't slogan as much as sloganeer as much as we used to.
But if people are missing the intention, don't you see a problem there? Maybe
No, because in actual fact, I don't think. Well, maybe some people do, but I'm sure that I don't write for other people.
Right. Well, maybe the people asking the questions are just too lazy to check it out.
Maybe, or maybe the only lyrics that work in a political sense are sloganeering type lyrics. You know, which I'm not really that interested in. You know, when the Beat did Stand Down Margaret, which was a overtly political song about Margaret Thatcher, we at the same time did Madame Medusa, which was about the same thing, and I think written just a much better lyric. You know, Stand Down Margaret, everybody knew what they were saying, but the record got banned and never got played on radio. Madame Medusa, which was never released as a single, got far more airplay on radio than Stand Down Margaret did. As far as I'm concerned, it's doing the job.
Yeah.
You know, it's saying what we wanted to say to more people. But in the end, that doesn't matter anyway, because when you write a lyric, as far as I'm concerned, you're writing it for yourself. You know, you write about it because it's something that burns you up, you know, or something that fires you up. You know, it's something that you want to say, that you're angry about. It doesn't really matter to me whether, you know, people are understanding what I'm saying. It's because I've said it. You know, it's, I suppose the same reason anybody writes poetry or whatever, you know, or a book. I mean, it's a bonus if lots of people buy the book, you know, but you've written the book for yourself.
Right.
And I prefer a more intimate approach anyway. You know, I mean, I like that in other people's material, and I like to reflect that in ours as well. But it's more of an intimate voice you're listening to, a smaller voice than big statements about the world and everything.
Right.
Those are sort of easy.
And once you've spent the first 5 years of your career doing very general sloganeering type songs, it's very difficult to write the same thing again.
Over and over again.
You know what I mean? So you do start to hone in on specifics rather than stay general. You know? So maybe the songs become, you know, a bit more subtle, and you have to look a bit deeper, you know, or listen a bit harder.
Well, I think when they do work, they need more.
Pardon?
When they do work, they need more. More subtle. More intimate songs work better when they're actually you get them.
Certainly more to you.
Well, to me, yes. They say they have a louder voice even though that they're smaller.
In the long run.
Yeah.
In the long run.
こうやって歌詞もそうだし音楽もそうだし結構変わってきてるわけです認識に変わってるでしかも8人もいて年末にも使いもなくてその間っていうのは割と一枚一枚書くことでもいいけどメンバー内で意見の対立になってな方向になってなるとか変化になってるとかそういうことはなんかスムーズにこうできてた
Having an 8-member band, and especially in your case, an unchanging lineup, do things go smoothly in terms of coming up with the direction each album or each performance? You talked about there being pulling in 8 different directions, but are the
well, it's never smooth when you've got 8 people.
Yeah.
You don't have, you know, one person who can say, okay, we've discussed it, this is the way it's going.
Right.
You know, what you do is you argue and vote, and you know, I mean, that's the way we do everything. But really, I mean, we argue and discuss the way we ought to go on the next album, but we don't actually have a plan. You know, we don't have concepts. I mean, Labour Love was the only concept album we ever had. You know, basically we argue and discuss, you know, what we ought to be doing, and then we get in and make the music. You know, and it comes out the way it comes out, and it's always, as I say, a compromise between 8 different viewpoints. But the 8 different viewpoints are all going in the same general direction. So I mean, it's not as if, you know, there are musical differences within the band that are going to cause people to say, I can't work on this album or anything like that. You know, it's just you know, you can end up being happy or satisfied with an album, but it still isn't quite what you think it should have been. You know, but, you know, that's life. I can live with that. I'm still making an album I'm going to be proud of. You know what I mean?
In the 8 years of the band, when did you have the biggest problem, the biggest conflict within the band?
It's all been a big conflict. I don't think there's any high points, is there? Or low points?
No, we just generally go along, you know, arguing.
We get a bit lazy sometimes. I think we've gone through really dry periods where we haven't worked as hard as maybe we should have and haven't done.
Yeah, but that hasn't really been like a conflict time. It's just when we all get a bit lazy, you know. And we've and our laziness is generally reflected in the quality of the album. You know, the album's not good enough. It's because we haven't worked hard enough, and that's not down to one person. That's a general trend. You know, we all get too lazy. Very definitely. UB40 was the low point in our recordings, you know, and although I think it's full of great songs, great lyrics, great tunes, it's just really badly done, you know, and that was because we were all very lazy. We were riding high. We had 2 multi-platinum albums around the world, and we relaxed, you know. We weren't aware of any pressure or, you know, there was no need to work hard on this album because whatever we did, it was going to sell platinum, you know. I mean, we weren't saying that, but that was the general sort of attitude, you know. We were feeling very relaxed and very confident, and that was when we made our worst record.
What brought you back after that, though? How did you how did you
the fact that it wasn't a good enough album, we all knew it. When we'd made it, and while we were mixing it, we knew it wasn't good enough. And we didn't have the courage of our convictions to say this album isn't good enough. We're starting again. We should have stopped, wiped the slate, and re-recorded the album, and we knew it. And we allowed it to go out, we released it, and it was, I mean, you know, it was a gold album all around, you know, in all our territories. You know, it did well for, you know, by anybody else's standards. It was good for a new band. You'd never been, if it was your first album, you'd be happy, you know. But as far as we were concerned, it was a dismal failure, you know. So what happened was we made Labour Love, which, you know, was the best-selling album we've ever done.
But we also have a very pragmatic approach as well, I think. We're likely not to scrap an album and re-record it because we don't think in those kind of terms. You know, when we make an album, we make it, and that's what it is. You know, and in the end, we do it at a certain time because that's what's needed for when we release and when we tour and all that.
We are very lazy. We're always running late. We're always, you know, deadlines yesterday. You know,
and it's also a bit of a prima donna-ish thing to go, this is bloody awful, let's scrap it and let's all start again, because I've seen a lot of bands do that, and it hasn't really helped us at all. We tend to want to just get in there and do it.
We signed a band called Echo Bass, a Birmingham band who were friends of ours, and we paid for them to go into our studio and make an album. They took twice as long as they should have doing it, and then completely scrapped it and started all over again. Re-recorded it and made a worse version of the album, and then promptly split up after we released it for them. So, you know, I mean, when you see other bands doing that, you know, and getting too precious and not having the confidence and all that, then you tend to be a bit sort of cavalier about your own product, you know. So, I mean, you know, there's a fine balance, you know, between being too precious and having the confidence in your own abilities. to say this isn't good enough, you know. And that's what we should have done then and didn't. But maybe if we hadn't done that album, we wouldn't have done Labour of Love. You know what I mean? Maybe we'd have always have put off Labour of Love. If 44 had been good enough, maybe we'd have just carried on and not done Labour of Love.
And funnily enough, here we are like maybe 10 years later, and we're probably more determined now than we've ever been. You know, the determination in us now is really strong.
Determined to do what?
To make good records and work and and do the job properly and that kind of thing. We're working harder now than we've ever worked.
For sure. We've never ever toured like this. Ever. We've always sort of done 6 weeks, 8 weeks maximum in any territory and gone home for a few weeks and then gone back out again, you know. And really cut our own noses up, you know.
So we were more jaded for 5 years ago than we are now. Exactly right. That's the fact.
じゃあ今後のバンドの方向性なんだけども、例えばね、みんなに愛される、ポップバンドとしてと、あともう一つ、チームの人に立ってたインディアント的なイノベーション、全面的なポップバンドとして、あといった選択肢があってから、思う。
If you had to choose between being a sort of a vanguard of the pop scene or a pop band which is widely loved, widely listened to, which would you rather be?
Pop band that's widely loved.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to be leaders of any field, and I don't, we've never been. Well, we have. We've been by coincidence a trendy band, you know, but only because reggae goes in and out of favour, you know, globally, not just in America. I mean, you know, that's what it does. And we've been hit, you know, at various points in our career. But I just much prefer being a band, the sort of band that most people don't think of when they're naming half a dozen, you know, of the most successful bands, you know what I mean? But the sort of band that quietly goes on selling tickets and selling records, you know. And I think that's the kind of band we are. You know, whenever you have articles on, you know, pop history and that kind of thing, nobody or hardly anybody ever mentions us, you know. The fact is that for 10 years we've been a very successful band and we're getting more successful all the time. And I think that's great. That's the way I like it. Keeps you out of the limelight, you know. You don't want to be pop stars.
You're right.
You know, and we've made conscious efforts not to be pop stars. What we want to be is, you know, people who make music, which is a different thing. You know,
I mean,
we don't work on our image.
Pop's just a product after all. I mean, and I like music, but I like it if it sort of makes me sort of tune and makes me feel happy in the morning when I'm getting ready and all that kind of thing. And I think if we can supply that, then I feel satisfied. If you're looking for any more depth, I think you'll be looking for other fields like pop music.
And also, if you work very hard at being, you know, the lead image of pop music, then you're in danger of becoming flavour of the month.
Yeah.
And once you become flavour of the month, then you become distasteful next month.
Very easy to become daisy.
Absolutely. You know, and we've watched a lot of bands do it. A lot of bands that, you know, were our contemporaries, you know, that came up at the same time, or have come up, you know, since, and have lasted a year or 18 months and then can't get heard. You know, whereas everything they released, you know, was gold dust, you know, for a year, and then all of a sudden they can't do anything. But we just keep quietly going along and enjoying the same success, you know, and it isn't the greatest success that, you know, that we could have, but it's, you know, it's happening. And it's longevity is what we're working towards, you know, and building a career, you know, which is what we've done and been very successful.
Yeah, I don't really need to be a multi-millionaire, just one thing.
Not greedy.
Yeah.
じゃあラストクエスチョンなんですけど、ロシアでキャビアを食べた。
何ですか？
自分のブリルのすぐ後だったんですよね。
This is going to have to be the last question.
Yes, this is the last
Because
question.
we're at a meeting 10 minutes ago.
Ooh, sorry. strange question to land.
I could tell that was strange. You were both laughing.
Did you eat
What?
caviar in the Soviet Union?
Yes, I eat it every day because it's like a snack every day.
But you guys went there right after Chernobyl, right?
Very cheap in Russia.
What?
You went there right after Chernobyl?
Radioactive caviar.
Oh, really? That explains why I glow at night. I wondered what that was.
It's not like now, isn't it?
I don't know why he asked that.
どうしてキャビアっていうのは濃縮率が一番高くてね、強力に危ない。
Because the caviar was apparently one of the more contaminated food substances.
Well, thank you for telling me.
If you come back from Canada next year, you know why.
Yeah.
I tried it, but I didn't like it.
Oh, I like caviar. I think caviar's really nice. Caviar and toast. It's my breakfast. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Sorry we went over time.
Grilled caviar.
Yeah.